Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive series, I'm going to explore the astrology, the big picture of March 2024. It's an incredibly powerful month. It begins with the Sun and Jupiter in a quite beautiful alliance, one of the luckiest in astrology. But we also have a connection between the North Node and Chiron on the 5th, which is exact. But those two are actually in touch for the whole of the month within 3 degrees. We have the second supermoon in succession on the 10th, which forges a really exciting link to Uranus. But then on the 20th, we have the Spring Equinox and the start of the Western tropical astrological year. The Sun returns to Aries, and this ushers in Cardinal Quadrant 1. Because the Western tropical zodiac is based on the seasons, this is the start of a 13-week period, so a critical point, but it also links in an amazingly potent angle to Pluto, the planet of transformation in the sign of Aquarius. We then have on the 25th the lunar eclipse in the air sign of Libra, but that too is going to be supported by the transformational energies of Pluto. So it's a mighty, mighty month. If you would like to know what this means for your zodiac sign, you can see underneath this video and check out each of them from Aries through to Pisces with my individual deep dive videos. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have your company. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please share them. I interact with each one. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for your company. Your likes, comments, shares and subscriptions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol, then you'll get an alert every time I drop a new video. So on the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart right at the start of this month. We can see that there's a lineup, a stellium of energy in the sign of Pisces, the Sun, Mercury, Saturn and Neptune. But the critical thing is the Sun and Saturn are very close together as we come into this new month. If you recall, they peaked in an absolute alliance on the 28th of February. But the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon, and this is a critical degree in astrology because it gives us a balance between the thrust of the Sun and the more receptive energies of the Moon. It's at 10 degrees in Capricorn. But that's very helpful in the sense that it forges a great alliance to Jupiter. Jupiter in the sign of Taurus can be very fortunate around financial matters. Of course, for the last 4 months of last year, Jupiter was in a retrograde. And we've had the rather unsettling energies of Uranus in the sign of Taurus, which in some ways has been counteracting the more positive vibe of Jupiter. Ironically, by the end of this month, the last 2 days, they actually start to come together and are going to peak on the 21st of April next month. But that midpoint at 10 degrees Capricorn just tells us that we need to stay in touch with our worldly interactions, anything to do with our professional situation, our goals and ambitions. But what that Pisces energy is asking us to think about is how things feel. And because Saturn is so close to the Sun, even though the Sun is forging that gorgeous, potentially very lucky link to Jupiter, along with that midpoint, what Saturn is saying is that we must keep our feet on the ground. Now, in fact, the Sun and Jupiter are in touch within 3 degrees through the first 4 days of this month. The sextile between the Sun and Jupiter is very enabling. But the Sun in the sign of Pisces is very reflective. I think what we're being asked to do here as we come into this month is not only be realistic with Saturn's help, and of course the midpoint in Capricorn governed by Saturn, but we're also asked in some ways to be in touch with our spirit, how we feel about things, our instincts. So whether we are grappling with a relationship matter to do with our physical vitality or our finances, just staying in touch with how it feels is such an important thing. Now, I mentioned in the introduction that the North Node and Chiron are within 3 degrees of each other for the whole of this month. That does, of course, become exact on the 5th. But it's worth noting that Venus is forging a beautiful link to both of them as we start this month, and that's something to be mindful of. But that connection is very much to do with our sense of identity. So whatever sign you have Chiron in yourself natally, we can still all reflect on this conjunction between the two in terms of our overall experience. Now, obviously, the North Node is the collective direction of travel, which is asking us in some ways to reinvigorate our whole approach. And Chiron, the wounded healer in the sign of Aries, is wanting us to get in touch with our value as an individual, but also have more confidence to do things that are good for us, not just be rooted in necessarily always looking for approval. So that's an interesting set of themes that we can all grapple with. Now in week 2, the Sun starts to move into a very enabling link with Uranus. So as much as Uranus has been disruptive at times over the last 6 years in the sign of Taurus, where it's not happy, it's in full. And of course Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius, which is a fixed sign. Taurus is a fixed sign too. But whereas Aquarius has that progressive side to it, Taurus really appreciates continuity. So if we've resisted change, it may have actually happened even in spite of that resistance. But the good news here is, again, we can use the experience of the Sun in Pisces, all the knowledge we've gained over the previous 12 months as it's journeyed through each of the 12 signs, to think about how we may just adapt a little bit. The sign of Pisces is very much to do with flexibility. It's a mutable sign. So those instincts that come from Pisces can still be directed in a constructive way. And again, if we're really tuning into how we feel about things, that could see us do something that's more innovative, fresh, or reviving that can be actually very positive for us. And on the 10th, we have the second successive super new moon. Essentially, this is not an astronomical theme, it's actually an astrological theme. It seems that the moon can be more powerful because it is nearer to us physically. But it's also forging a terrific link with Uranus. Because the moon's in the mix, what we have basically is a cazimi. The sun and the moon are together, but the sun magnifies the energy of the moon. Now, of course, the moon itself is mightily powerful and also governs the second decan of the sign of Pisces. But in fact, this new moon occurs just 17 minutes into the third decan of Pisces, at 20 degrees and 17. So it's very much in touch with the Martian energy of Scorpio, the third of the water triplicities. So having the sun and the moon, but angling towards Uranus in that constructive way in the sextile, but with a little bit more feist there because Mars is in the mix. So that's pushing us in some ways to listen to our hunches, but also take action, go with them. So over the following month, whether it is to do with working at our emotional, psychological and spiritual worlds, whatever ideas we generate, Uranus and that Mars third decan energy are really saying, look, change can be as good as a rest. Of course, it's not always good to change things just for the sake of it, and that takes us back to that point about things feeling right. Now, Mercury is going to be moving into the sign of Aries, and that's also on the 10th, and that angles to Pluto as well. When Mercury and Pluto are in a constructive angle, it gives us awesome powers of penetrative understanding. But Mercury moving into Aries is good because Mercury's not that happy in the sign of Pisces. It's watery, and Mercury thrives on a bit of logic. So we pump a little bit of fire and oxygen into the mix, then Mercury's really enabled. So if we're wanting to start things afresh, the link with Pluto suggests our perceptions can be sharper and we can want to actually take action. But ironically, on the 11th, Venus replaces Mercury. Now, Venus likes being in Pisces, unlike Mercury. It's exalted here. And this is a great opportunity to feel things. But the thing is that Venus is going to be linking up to Saturn. Venus also forges a glorious link to Jupiter, and that happens in week 3. And that's one of the luckiest of all planetary alliances, because Venus will be exalted. Jupiter's pretty comfortable in the sign of Taurus. These are the two planets of fortune, Jupiter the greater and Venus the lesser benefics in traditional astrology. So it may be that Venus in the 12th house and its instincts, even its romance, but its ability to feel things and be very soothing, whether it is around finance or relationships, can be a real asset, except that it does also meet Saturn, and that's going to peak on the 21st. If there is a relationship in your world that isn't working, it really is going to be seriously tested at this point, because what Venus in the 12th house is asking us to think about are the issues of trust, faithfulness, sincerity. This is collectively where we can all try to understand the more spiritual dimension of our connections to others. So the coldness, the cool detachment of Saturn can highlight a relationship where there is a lack of those qualities. And it could, in a relationship that's really bumped along the bottom, prove to be somewhat terminal. But the 20th, the Spring Equinox, a really exciting point in the whole year, because this kickstarts that whole Western tropical calendar. But this year it forges a brilliant link to the moon in Leo, so more fire, but also the sun is linking, like Mercury did, to Pluto. So the sun and Pluto is a very potent mix. This is an awesome opportunity to start new things. If we have had some things naturally come to the close with all that Piscean energy, whether it's some interest, whether it's some friendships, a relationship, a job that we had, this is the chance to really go again. And you can go again in the most dynamic way. But it is going to be important, to be honest, to be mindful of the ruler of the sign of Aries, because that's going to be moving into Pisces on the 22nd. So although we can be very single-minded, although we can set goals and ambitions and be determined to just action them in a very direct way, because Mars in the 12th house is going to make us much more aware of the psychological domain, but the Sun and Pluto in the 11th house, very much about how we connect to others, our network, our long-term aims, but also our higher principles. But the Sun smashing back into Aries is more about risk-taking, but its ruler is saying just a few days later, whoa, just be aware that there may be some things that still need to be resolved. This could be to do with past upsets, traumas, angers that are still lingering deep within us. In a more constructive way, Mars is great for any kind of subterranean work, whether it's a diver at sea, seriously, or someone who's very interested in perhaps forensic science, is trying to understand why things have happened, or even psychology itself. Mars here can be terrific for really probing deep, for sure. But the Sun does lose a little bit of drive and momentum between the 14th and the 19th when it aligns with Neptune, the co-ruler of the sign of Pisces, but one which can dissipate vitality. So we may find just before the Spring Equinox occurs that we may just need to rest a little bit, just collect our thoughts and not overextend ourselves. But once that Spring Equinox explodes into life, it really is a case of go, go, go. Now the 25th sees that lunar eclipse in the sign of Libra. If you recall, on the 14th of October 2023, we had the first in this series of the Libra solar eclipses. So this is a challenge really to what occurred then. Now obviously Libran energy is very much about relating. It can be about diplomacy, balance, also important around fairness, but also Libra, when it's not heard, can be very feisty because it's a cardinal sign, can demonstrate the energies of more like Aries. So it depends what's been playing out in your situation since then. But if you feel in a relationship context something hasn't been working so well, this is going to be a tender point, because the sign of Aries is about being very single-minded and singular in the way we go about things. So it's very much self-focused, whereas the sign of Libra is very much more consensual, collegiate, working together. It's about trying to find harmony. So if there is a lack of harmony, the fact that Pluto is informing the energy of this eclipse over the next 6 months suggests that if a relationship really isn't working for us in the way we want, we have an opportunity to transform it with Pluto's help, or it could make way. Now, as I mentioned before, there is going to be the start of that connection between Jupiter and Uranus. It builds up the last 2 days of this month within 3 degrees. It's actually going to go on through to the 5th of May. So it's a long transition, but that peak will be next month on the 21st. But you can see as this month begins, just to summarise, that midpoint at 0 degrees in Capricorn is asking us all to be businesslike, but at the same time tune into the more feeling energy of Pisces, which is very strong at the start of the month. You can see the energies of Jupiter, but also Pluto are also very powerful right throughout March. And that node conjunction with Chiron on the 5th, the North Node, is a seminal moment if we want to work on any issues to do with our identity. But to check out your deep dive, in-depth horoscope forecast for March, please see the link beneath this video. If you would like to ascend above your zodiac sign and understanding of that and embrace the power of more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of birth data of time, date and place, I can prepare for you your life roadmap report. This is totally unique to you and will give you searing insights into the patterns that have played out in your life so far, but crucially a much more intimate understanding of how to work with those planetary energies in a more successful way future forwards. In my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12 months forecast. That's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique celestial blueprint. Please see the link beneath this video for more.